Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. First up on our list of historical highlights for the week is Betsy ten Boom. In Corrie ten Boom's book, The Hiding Place, Corrie told of the ten Boom family's struggles in Amsterdam and their efforts to hide Jews from persecution during the Nazi occupation. The family's home was raided, and Corrie and her sister Betsy were taken to the Ravensbrück concentration camp, where Betsy died on December 16th, 1944. Next up on our list, and the subject of our deep dive, is the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, perhaps the single greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. In the ancient city of Qumran, on the west bank near the Dead Sea, pieces and parts of copies of the Bible were found in jars in 1947. The only book of the Bible that was found totally intact was Isaiah, the Old Testament book that describes Jesus Christ more than any other. Last up on our list of historical highlights for the week is John Newton, author of the hymn Amazing Grace. After being converted to Christianity on a slave trading ship, Newton wanted to become a priest in the Church of England, but he was rebuffed by the Archbishop. Due to his persistence, however, Newton was eventually granted a church in Olney, England. The church at Olney became so well attended that it had to be expanded. Newton was a friend of preacher George Whitefield and poet William Cowper, and he had a significant influence on the outlawing of slavery in the British Empire along with William Wilberforce. Newton died on December 21st, 1807. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, founder and director of the Center for Christian History, talks with Bobby Duke about the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of This Week in Christian History. And we are focusing this week in our deep dive on the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we are bringing this in December with the idea that it is sometime in the winter, right? Maybe when they were first founded. And so joining us on this conversation and dialogue is Dr. Bobby Duke, who is the Chief Curatorial, do I say that word right?
Curatorial officer, yes.
Curatorial officer, thank you. That one was not on my vocabulary list growing up, okay, about that, with the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. So not only in your role as Chief Curatorial Officer, but also because the Dead Sea Scrolls are a great exhibit that is rolling out at the Museum of the Bible, we thought it would be super apropos to have you be our guest, and we really appreciate you joining us, Dr. Duke.
Oh, no, well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, the Dead Sea Scrolls, I mean, I would think out of 100 people of faith or otherwise is not going to be an unheard of term, right? People would know them generally. Give us just kind of an idea of kind of really what they are and what they are not, maybe about what these scrolls are.
Right. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, in some ways, is a little bit of a marketing deception, because there really were very few full scrolls found. But saying Dead Sea Scrolls fragments doesn't have the same marketing power to it.
Who wants to see a fragment? I don't care about it. Show me the scroll, man. Right? Okay.
But in 1947, and the story has moved because it came firsthand from the Bedouin accounts, the local nomadic shepherds that lived near the Dead Sea. They found the first cave, Cave 1, which eventually 11 caves were found from 1947 to 1956. And the way the story goes is they were searching for a lost goat, threw some rocks into a cave, heard a crash, went back and investigated and found Cave 1 with some broken jars and the material coming out of Cave 1, which included one of the full scrolls, the Great Isaiah Scroll. But eventually 11 caves were found. There was an archaeological site near the caves. It was already known by scholars, but until the caves were found, scholars didn't really think it was that significant of a site. But
Wow.
immediately when the scrolls were found, they started doing archaeological digs right there in the 1950s and turned up some fascinating material that most likely would indicate that the group that lived there at the site of Qumran, which is the archaeological site, were the Essenes that we know of from Josephus. But you're right, the Dead Sea Scrolls as a phrase is something that uh, even the average person of faith or even just the average educated person has heard of because they
Mhm.
are one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever. I would say personally, I think it is the greatest archaeological discovery ever because it has such an ongoing impact in people of faith today. Um, King Tut's treasures, I've seen them in Cairo, amazing, but
Mhm.
they're just beautiful ancient history. They don't have an ongoing reality for people
Sure.
of faith.
Sure. Well, so when we talk about what are actually in the fragments or the pieces outside of uh, the Bible, what are the other books that are a part of that that are they're non-canonical or that are just other books that had, you know, nothing necessarily to do with what we understand as scripture?
Right. So the number is just above 900 now when you look at scribal hands, that 900 different documents at minimum were part of this library there at
Wow.
Qumran. Now, I said most of it is very fragmentary. The why it took so long to publish them was because they were like having 900 different puzzles of which you throw all the pieces out except for a third, and then you try to figure out what the 900 puzzles actually
Mm,
represent. But when it comes to the biblical text, they're about a third of those 900. And then the
okay.
other two-thirds are either texts that were just known at the Dead Sea Scrolls, so they were not known before in the history of literature until the scrolls are found. And then we
Okay.
have another set of books that are, say, not in the Protestant canon, but maybe are in the Catholic canon or in other like Ethiopic canons. So books like the Book of Jubilees or the
Okay.
Book of Enoch or the Book of Ben Sira Ecclesiasticus in the Catholic canon. So some of those are also found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran and at Masada. So Masada is also linked in when we talk about Dead Sea Scrolls. It basically is all the scrolls found in those 11 caves right by Qumran and
Okay.
all the other texts that were found along that western and northwestern shore of the Dead Sea.
Well, so when you say they dug and they're digging and they found, tell us more of who is the they? Is that the
Right.
Israel
So,
Antiquities Associate? I mean, Authority, or is that just Joe Schmo out
yeah.
there with a camel comes across
Yeah.
them, or what? Who is the they?
Yeah. So in the 1950s, that part of the world was part of Jordan. So the first sets of Dead Sea Scrolls that were released actually came out in a volume published by Oxford University. That was the discoveries in the Judean desert of Jordan. After 1967, when you have now the concepts of the reunification of Jerusalem, you now have, say, the West Bank being under Israel control and all the modern politics there, the site of Qumran became part of Israel. So pre 1967, the they was really the French archaeological school called the École Biblique in
Mm,
Jerusalem that did the digging in the 1950s. And then post 1967, it definitely has become a major focus of the Israel Antiquities Authority because the scrolls are so wrapped up, even in the timing of the founding of the state of Israel. So, 1947, you
mhm.
have the Dead Sea Scrolls found. 1948, the state of Israel is founded in May of 1948. So, it is undeniable that these texts are from a Jewish group that lived by the Dead Sea right around the time the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. So they really are very integral to even the Israeli identity. So the they in that and archaeologically, pre 1967, you would have had various Jordanian archaeological groups and the Ecole Biblique in Jerusalem. Post 1967, very clearly a major project of the Israel Antiquities Authority.
And so, did they just say, I'm just kind of making it at a maybe a very base level about that. Oh my gracious, we found this in cave one. Hear ye therefore go. Start looking in caves. Everybody start
Yeah.
looking to see what we can find. And then finally somebody says, nothing in this cave. Let's move to the next one. And they're kind of Is it that simple? I mean, I know it's not that easy, but I mean, is it that simple enough that they literally were looking every crack and cranny that they could find to see where else there might be other things stored?
Yeah, so from 1947 to 56, I like to use the concept of a race because the Bedouins that found Cave 1, they were not scholars. They really did not know the significance of what they found.
Mm.
Eventually, there was a American scholar in Jerusalem that sent information back to a professor, William Foxwell Albright, in the United States. And we even have a letter in our exhibit that can be seen that was handwritten by William Foxwell Albright that says, basically, you've found the greatest manuscript discovery basically ever. Well,
Wow.
once the local Bedouins started seeing all this interest in the caves, it became a race. So the Bedouin would look for a cave, and then the scholars would come back later and then find more material there. So when it was all said and done in 1956, the Bedouin found more of the caves than the scholars. Now, just because the Bedouin found the cave doesn't mean they got everything out of it. So then scholars with the École Biblique would come back, they would dig some more, and they would turn up even more manuscripts. So particularly Cave 4. Cave 4 is the mother lode cave. 80+% of all scroll fragments were found in Cave 4 that was there. And it's the iconic picture that you often see whenever they show pictures of Qumran. It's actually Cave 4, which people sometimes feel a little bit deceived. They're like, well, I heard the story of a missing goat. How did did it fly up there? Because the cave does not fit the story of the discovery, but it was Cave 4, not Cave 1.
Interesting. So when they found a fragment, okay, and let's just say a fragment might be as big as the end of my thumb, right? It's not necessarily even as big as my hand, right? I mean, it might just be that little piece right there. They might be able to see what that fragment, read maybe what that fragment is, but understanding where that fragment fit into the larger, bigger piece of the puzzle, right? That's what takes so much time to be able to try to connect. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Or is that not right? Okay.
Yeah, and there are pictures in the 1950s of tables at what was then called the Palestine Archaeological Museum. It was later named the Rockefeller Museum in East Jerusalem, but just tables and tables of fragments just laid out on them. And the scholars would really look at handwriting and say, okay, these two fragments look like they go together. But one of the reasons why the biblical texts were the easiest to work on at first is you already had, say, the Masoretic text. That there is a lot of affinity between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text from centuries later. So you could find a fragment, and if it had a couple words that you could identify strung together, you could say, well, this phrase does show up also in the book of Isaiah or the book of Genesis or the book of Deuteronomy, and you could identify those. The harder material was the stuff that was not known before the scrolls were found. And if you found a little fragment with just a handful of letters in Hebrew or Aramaic, how does this fit to the overall prize? So when I taught, one of my favorite classes when I used to teach at Azusa Pacific University was a Dead Sea Scrolls class. And I actually would take any of my students who knew Hebrew, and they would have to play that game. I would give them a fragment of something I already knew, and they would have to, and I would tell them it's a biblical fragment. So they didn't go off on this wild goose chase, but they would have to, with concordances and others, try to figure out where that fragment could come from based on the letters. Bible software makes it a whole lot easier, and even AI technology in the next decade, I'm going to prognosticate that you're going to see AI technology in Dead Sea Scrolls start doing a lot of research generation.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with Bobby Duke by clicking the View Full Interviews button on the podcast page of centerforchristianhistory.com. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and follow the Center for Christian History on Facebook and Instagram. Our next podcast episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.